This episode of the Media Leader podcast was edited by our production partner, Trisonic. For a full range of audio, media buying, and creative services, including podcast production, check out trisonic.co.uk.
The toy category as a whole is shrinking. The life cycle of it is way truncated than it ever was. So, we have a shorter amount of time to speak to these children. And when we do, we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's impactful.
Welcome to the Media Leader podcast. I'm Jack Benjamin. Something I love to do and have been wanting to do more of on this podcast is really get into the mind of brand marketers. As much as I love speaking with agency leaders about broader trends among their client lists, there's something unique about talking to a brand directly to understand how they specifically are working to guide media investment in pursuit of positive business outcomes. One brand that has an especially interesting media strategy is Hasbro. The toy company owns a huge swath of major brands and IP, much of it primarily consumed by children, and managing the portfolio and the different media tactics needed across those brands presents an interesting challenge. So it was a pleasure to speak with Jennifer Burch and Kristina Fields, both senior directors of global media for Hasbro, about how they balance investment across brand and performance media throughout their portfolio and work to appeal to kids across various media channels without explicitly targeting them. We also spoke about how they've been dealing with macroeconomic uncertainty this year, how their relationship with agencies has changed over time, and about the importance of brand safety. This is our conversation. I hope you enjoy. Jennifer Burch and Kristina Fields, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining me here in London all the way from the States.
Thanks for having us.
We're so excited.
First of all, how did each of you get into the media industry in the first place? And then what appealed about working brand side at Hasbro specifically?
Yeah, I can start with that. So, hi, I'm Jen Burch. I'm the Senior Director of Global Brand Media at Hasbro. And I'd say I actually stumbled into media. So I had gotten a degree in global marketing and had seen a job at Virgin Atlantic where it said it was a communication role. So I thought it was more of like a PR kind of comms role. And then I started and realized very quickly it was actually media and creative. And I just fell in love with it. And I've been doing it ever since. I've only been on the brand side. I've had the opportunity to work for some very cool brands. And to me, it really is about making sure that I have a connection to the brands. And certainly at Hasbro, we have some iconic ones that everyone has known, has a lot of nostalgia. I was a My Little Pony fan growing up. So it's just very cool to be able to continue that, especially now as I have kids that are in the brands as well. So kind of come full circle.
Very sweet. Kristina?
So I actually started my career in magazines.
Oh, wow.
Which, RIP.
Yeah.
Don't say that too loud.
It's true.
We're in a different market of consumption.
That's true.
Well, there are trends certainly that have gone in one
I
direction.
just, when you're in an airport, the section is much smaller than it once was. I think we can all say that. And then from there, really transitioned to working at some big ad agencies in Manhattan, always in digital, always in fashion. Worked for a brand called Vince, which makes some really beautiful sweaters. And then transitioned over to a really luxe ad agency that was called Morpheus Media, where I worked on all of the LVMH fashion and beauty business, and then transitioned over to Kate Spade, which was kind of like my dream job. If you can't see me all, but people know me as the sparkly redhead. So honestly, walking in there was just the most iconic of things. So we really brought that brand for one of the first brands on Pinterest. We really were kind of at the preface of all of that stuff as it was coming. And we had an amazing leadership team that really was just go, get weird. And I truthfully feel like that is the best type of media there could be. And then my husband and I moved back to Rhode Island, where I have been at Hasbro for the past 8 years.
Gotcha. So it was a move and then find different work.
Exactly.
You still love fashion, I imagine.
I still love fashion.
Yes.
Yes.
So Hasbro owns a huge number of brands. You mentioned My Little Pony already, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Power Rangers. I grew up on Monopoly, Play-Doh. Peppa Pig is huge, obviously, in this market. Mm-hmm. The list can go on. It's a really large number, and many are really quite unique. So I'm curious from a media perspective, how you go about tackling each brand differently.
It's so interesting because I think that a lot of people, when they think about Hasbro, of course, it's a house of brands. we don't ever advertise Hasbro.
Right.
And I think that for us, where we are most challenged is because each brand is so unique, but there are some that you can kind of bulk together within a target audience. And that's really important for Jen and I and how we approach it. Because we do know that some brands, like a preschool brand, you really need a kid and an adult to make sure that you're getting that true connection. But then there's some that are, there's a teen target or it's a fan target. So it is very, very interesting. And what Jen and I always try and do is make sure that, and I don't believe I said this, I oversee the performance retail side of the business. My title is Senior Director of Global Media, but performance retail as Jen is brand media.
Right.
So together, it's really about creating all of the impacts across the funnel.
Yeah, agreed with that. And I think for us, it's about those like audiences.
Yeah.
So we tend to group brands by preschool and fashion, and then kind of getting into our boy action, which are like your 5 to 8, which is where you're going to see Transformers, or a Power Ranger if there was a media supported item in there. And the reason we do that is because consumption trends are so similar along the audiences. So for us, it's into that nuanced, which is usually like a 2 to 3 year window that we have for this product for that target audience. So how do we think about what a preschooler is doing? What does their day look like? To Christina's point, how is the parent interacting with them? Like, obviously, when you're a preschooler, you have zero purchasing power, but the parent is in control of the media choice. And so they're putting the TV on, they're choosing. And so what we see is preschoolers really lean more into IP. Parents feel it's safe content to put on more on the big screen because the parent is going to set the TV, be able to walk out of the room. We call that parenting in my house when the TV is on and I can leave. Something's just running. They're busy.
Or a co-view, right?
Yeah,
As what industry
a co-view and I am
that.
outside the room, not in there.
Right.
We could talk about co-view all day and whether we believe in it or not. But looking at that and how does that compare to, a 5 to 8 year old who is starting to really have what we call fandoms and know what they're interested in, and they're the ones now in control and they're being handed a device, whether it's a tablet or a phone. And how does that differ? Now they're in control of the TV and being able to turn it on. They're into gaming. They're hearing friends. Like, once you truly get into school is where we see a lot of kid and their own self-expression and wants come in. And then it changes even more once you think of our 8 to 11-year-old brands, which is going to be like a Beyblade or a Nerf. And that kid is fully in control. And the parent is, they still have to buy, right? Like an 8-year-old still doesn't have a credit card to go on Amazon and purchase something.
Thank God, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure my kids can operate my Apple phone, Apple Wallet. So I should probably take that back and not let them ever know about that. But, they still do need the parent, but it's a very specific, like a kid at that age is coming in and saying, like, I want this thing. Whereas, again, when you look at a preschool audience, the parent is certainly influenced. If their child wants to watch Peppa, they're thinking naturally like, oh, my kid likes Peppa, entertainment, I'm going to buy the product that goes along with that. Whereas an older kid knows what he wants. The parent is less involved in what the kid is choosing. It's very much like, here's my wish list, buy it.
Yeah, it's interesting that the consumer sort of shifts, even though you're always wanting to appeal to the child. The target audience is at first more maybe targeted toward the parent who's in control of media and also the consumption spend. And then as they age, you have to start actually targeting the younger child or the teenager as they sort of get up.
Except we don't target.
I guess
don't target
legally
kids.
We never target children.
Right.
Okay.
In any country you're in.
But the appeal sort of changes because who's leading the decisioning is adapting over time.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. And I think that's where if anyone who's listening has ever listened to anything that Kristina and I've talked about, we have a very media specific, it's super technical term we call splitsies, which is how we think about upper mid funnel and tying into Kristina's world of lower funnel. And I think that's where really the audience difference comes in, because what you're going to see is on my end, it's a bit more of a lighter touch with the kids and making sure that we're showing up on YouTube and connected TV and linear, because again, it's IP driven. We know it's safe content that the parent, but really hitting the parent a little bit harder because they're going to be the ultimate decision maker in what's being purchased. And then
I take all those people and I convert them on our major retailer sites, which would be Amazon in the US, Walmart, and Target.
Right.
Which also makes my media look very good, right? Because from a brand perspective,
That's right.
especially kid targeted, it's very difficult to attribute my media back directly to point of sale. And so we'll use the two worlds to look and say, what does the brand need? What is the audience? What is the global brand team requesting as the brief to us? And how do we need to move money between us? But then also how our channels come together and how we use it to full funnel measure as well. But yes, to your point, it's absolutely the older that you're getting, you're seeing that within my brand media worlds, like I'm pulling back a bit on adult as they get older because it's just the circle. Okay, your kid asked for this specific thing. Like, let's make it super easy when they go on Amazon and they search for it. Christina's world really needs to be front and center. Hopefully we've created that demand already by going after the kid, where it's definitely more of a even or split as you go down into the younger audience.
And it makes sense because in terms of building brand affinity, if you hopefully you've already got that audience when they were younger, and then they know about your brands, and by the time that they're a bit older and maybe try and lead those decisions a little bit more, then you can sort of, it sounds like, sort of tone down the brand and tone up the performance a little bit.
And what's been incredibly, almost transformative, I would say, to our business is we've actually moved all adult business to sit within one agency. So in the past, we would have brand media, someplace, performance retail. Because if you think about it, they're really specialized specifically with kids, really nuanced, really, it's important to understand the foundation of the kid audience and how you have to approach it. But what we were finding is the budgets were sitting with different agencies. It was really hard to move things around. So this past year, we've actually moved everything within Kepler, who is our adult agency. We came to them first because they are really fantastic and at retail media, and they can do the adult side. So when I'm seeing something that's picking up, Jen's seeing something that's picking up, we now have the ability to fluidly move those dollars across. So it allows us to really ensure that we're getting that adult across all of the various touch points prior to them converting on an Amazon.com.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how the relationship with agencies has changed over time? It sounds like your needs have changed.
Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think one of the biggest things that we found is we've worked with a bunch of larger agencies, as you can imagine. And one of the things for us when we were looking at different agencies is they needed to be incredibly collaborative. And some agencies really just from the jump were like, we don't want to speak. There's rates. There's things that make us uncomfortable. We work with Media Hub for her kid business. And as I mentioned, Kepler, and the two agencies have, truthfully, it's like they meet without us now. It's been completely, Jen can speak to it more than I can, but the quality of the work for our plans is incredible. And honestly, I felt before, which was one of the reasons why we had to move the business, they were doing us a disservice. Because at the end of the day, if you want to do what's right for Hasbro, we all want to win, right? But if you're not going to have those conversations and be able to collaborate in our behalf, then you're not the right partner for us.
Yeah, and I'd say as well, 2 years ago, Kristina and I took over global media at Hasbro. As previously, we were a bunch of regional media teams sitting reporting into regional marketing teams as part of the commercial organization for whether you were in EMEA, APAC, or North America or LATAM. So we were a bunch of separate teams. And then there was kind of this small grouping of global media. It was 2 people. And it was always very strange because they weren't connected into what each market needed or was doing, or how the dollars were being unlocked to drive the commercial needs. And so when we had sat and said, okay, how are we going to set this up? How are we going to do it differently? A lot of companies are actually set up in that same fashion, and we just don't see that this is going to work. So we decided, and also saying this is a huge role. Media is one of the biggest drivers of Hasbro's business. It's one of, obviously, then the biggest expenses of Hasbro's business. Also because how many brands we're supporting and in how many markets we're running it. And so that's where we had kind of decided, okay, I'll take mid and upper, you take lower, knowing retail especially is just booming. We want to make sure that we're really spending enough time in each of these channels. And so we brought the team globally together in that same way. And so now I say we're a global media team because we're a bunch of regional people that sit in market, but with global hats on. And that meant we needed an agency who could also think the same way as us. And I'd say for both Media Hub and Kepler, we have such fantastic talent on the team and things are really connected. Previously, if I was running something in the US, I had no idea what was running in the UK and vice versa. And then after doing some audits, we're like, wow, we're using the same partners. and we almost just ran the same unit. That was very silly because we worked with.
Or like it would be the exact opposite of like, I'm not even supporting that brand and they are. So then you think about it holistically, you're like, no wonder why it's not popping through, right? Because we're all doing something completely different.
So it's about sort of getting everyone talking together and making sure that, I mean, it's a big challenge. What do you make of, there's lots of change going on, frankly, in the agency space at the moment. I'm curious, just in general, what do you make of the movement toward embracing, especially like more AI tools? Is this something that you're wanting to embrace yourselves? Do you feel comfortable that agencies are moving in this direction?
I think it has a place everywhere, but I also feel like we were talking about this yesterday, actually. It's like, it's a really fantastic foundation, but it's like the art and the science. You always it can help with efficiencies, but at the end of the day, you still need that human touch.
Do you care more about efficiency or do you care more about human touch?
This is where I think we were actually, because Kristina's world is all the efficient channels, and I'm like, you need the human. This is brand, it's
brand
emotion.
Versus performance.
So I think this is probably one of the few areas that we actually have altering views on. I think from my end, certainly AI plays a place. We are very lucky to work at Hasbro where we've fully embraced it. We have an enterprise license to ChatGPT. I literally use it on everything. Like I've created a media brief widget where I've uploaded a template and I'm able to then dump in all of our audience insights, all post-campaign wraps, and see what it's going to spit out as a first draft. But I would say it's just that. It's a first draft.
You're actually checking.
Yes. And I think, it's all about what you're putting into it. So if it's something to get you to think about another market or to gut check, for me, overseeing obviously a ton of markets that I'm not personally in, to use it to say, is this something that's popular there? Is this something that's culturally relevant there? I think that brings a ton of value, but it would never replace the fact of needing a human to review something. And again, I think it's how do you then continue to build on it? It's the input of me saying, okay, great, that was a great first draft of a media brief, but I actually wanted to think about these 3 things. And also our business is going in here. So how do I keep entering those? And that required a human to interact back with AI to get a better response from. So I do think there's efficiencies. It can certainly save you the first draft of having to pull together a media plan. If you can upload, in our case, sometimes we have 14 different decks between what our internal research agency AIM gives us of research data about the brand health tracking, them with the agencies, both 2 separately are pulling together as post-campaign wraps. Let's be honest, nobody has time to read 40 slides and 14 decks. So to be able to input all that and hey, summarize the top 5 points for me, that's huge. That's an efficiency play, but I do think you still need the human element. And I'd say from the agency side, I think where it's really benefiting us within kids, we kind of jokingly said, because just in case legal ever listens to anything, we don't target children, we contextually align. And when you think of YouTube and how big of a space, it's the Wild West. And to align with not only the right age-appropriate content within a 2 to 3 year age window, but also brand safe that we feel comfortable aligning the brand with, AI has been a huge unlock in that and helping us kind of auto-generate and pull together. And you may get channels that we never would have as humans thought of before because AI is just so advanced and can scour thousands of rows of different kinds of content and kind of pull it together. But again, there's still going to be a human that's reviewing it as well.
So I actually think we are very aligned.
Oh, last night you were all efficiency on me.
I am efficiency, but to the human touch piece, I think we're there.
There we go. Splitsies again.
You mentioned YouTube. What other types of channels would you say you generally tend to over-index on, especially for the brand side of the business?
I would say it's the ones you'd expect. So certainly YouTube. I think Amazon has been a big unlock for us just with them rolling out Prime Video and being ad supported overnight. That was massive for us, especially to be able to, what Kristina was saying, with it sitting, in one agency and all booking through the same Amazon dashboard, we're now able to see the touch point of the consumer journey and how many new to brand consumers I'm bringing into Kristina's world.
It's Meta, an outcome play.
Meta, TikTok, certainly within the adult brand space, we see drive huge traffic numbers over to our retailers. And since we've been kind of moving away from produced content into creator-led content, we're seeing engagement there really popping. And then mobile gaming, across everyone. I would say it's kids and adults, and it's even down to the youngest audiences. We've just started running mobile gaming ads for preschoolers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which,
Okay.
I always joke,
But you're not targeting the preschoolers.
we're not, no.
But
It's
you're
all
running
about the
ads for
right
the-
game. It's all about the right game.
Games
Where would
that-
that kid be? And then we'll make
Yes.
sure that content is
shows
there.
That sounds a bit like targeting, but
No,
without
absolutely it's
without
not.
officially
Well, there's-
calling it that.
Well, we don't know because we
You don't
can't
know that
actually
those
collect
people
any
actually-
data.
No data. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Based on experience, though, I'd say between us, we have 6 children. So
We sound like the Brady Bunch.
I know we do.
You mentioned. I mean, the thing about Hasbro is that it has media IP itself as well. And I'm curious how you consider that within the sort of brand and performance marketing positioning, because you have the Hasbro cinematic universe. Has been attempts at that. You mentioned working with creators on social media. There's new ways to develop the IP. I'm curious where you guys come into that conversation, if at all. I mean, you mentioned clearly working with creators. That's got to be a big challenge because you want to make sure that they're representing the brand in the way that you want, but also giving them creative freedom to do what they want with the different brands.
Yeah, I think this is where Hasbro is also a bit unique because, like, from my perspective, like the global brand team owns the brand. And so they're going to be looking at what I would consider like the influencer brand ambassador. They're looking for the voice box who's going to represent. From my media perspective, I'm looking for, if I'm going to run on TikTok, I want the most authentic person on TikTok who can bring my product to life. Because at the end of the day, my job as the media person is, yes, it's brand affinity, but it's more importantly product awareness and purchase intent, that someone knows that there's a new Play-Doh product coming and they know why it's interesting and unique and why they should buy it. And so we kind of think about it a bit differently. I would say from the media end, we think about it as the creator, where you have the licensed freedom to bring it to life because I chose you, because you certainly embody the brand, whether it's like the tone or the wit or someone being like a bit cheeky and outgoing, and that matches with Furby, but it's how would you bring to life Furby? Okay, you're great. Like, but I'm not looking for them to necessarily represent the brand and become like an ambassador.
It's really about integrating within their content. We know that target audience likes that person, follows that person, respects that person. So how can we make sure that we are integrating within that place that just gives us kind of that street cred?
Yeah, I think that's where media is also going. Like,
yeah, absolutely. That's why there's no magazines, right?
Yeah.
Like no more, like if you think about like fashion editors, they're not, all due respect, right? Like it's a very different place now. These influencers have that voice of authority.
Yeah.
Even though they're not journalists.
Correct.
Right.
It seems. I don't
Never
Wow.
a dig at journalists.
Yeah.
Always a place.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
That's very reassuring. You brought up brand safety as a constant concern, as I imagine it must be, especially for your brand, but for most brands. But you also talk about being on platforms where you aren't necessarily in control of the adjacency of where you're showing up because everyone's algorithms are unique and you don't really know where a piece of creator content might be next to you in the feed.
Yep.
How much does that concern you when working with platforms?
We have a fantastic legal team. Truly, like I think that at the end of the day, like we really try to give them all of the risks. And then we can always make sure that, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we're doing, it's digital, so we can take it down. There's always an out clause. There's always something that allows us to pivot as needed. But I mean, that's part of being out there. That's part of it.
And we put as much in place as we can.
Yeah.
So certainly, we have negative keywords or site blacklists that are going to be implemented. So we put as much as we can possibly control.
How do you make sure you're not overzealous? Because we've reported so much in the past year about keyword block lists basically destroying publisher businesses. To your point around magazines not doing so hot.
Yeah.
It doesn't help when you have too many keywords in your block list. You might not even realize because you might not be checking it that often. And suddenly you're not showing up on all of the most premium parts of the web. And in fact, through programmatic might be showing up through places that you have no idea where your ad's showing up, and it's probably unseemly. And we've seen lots of reporting around that recently. So how do you make sure you're not one of those brands that's showing up like that?
So to me, that's honestly the agency. So they're in charge of that.
But you're the one that sets the lists, or they come up with the list for you?
The agency comes up with the list for us, and we just review it and see if it kind of tracks. I think it's difficult, right? Because with kids, we have to be extremely careful. You can very quickly end up in a bad situation, which is what happened to YouTube several years ago.
Right.
And when they kind of took and made for kid marked content with comments turned off. So you can very quickly end up in a really bad situation there. So we do rely on the agencies. They're always looking at our lists and updating our lists, and it's really their responsibility to ensure that we're showing up in safe places. I will say in the 8 years that I've been at Hasbro, I think we've been flagged 2 times for either adjacency that we did not mean to be in, thought we had preclusions from, and ended up there anyway, that added a new term to the list after, or, we kind of ran, to your point, like we can't control everyone's algorithm and what you're interested in. And sometimes we may run before a video that we didn't necessarily want to, but it happens so infrequently. And we still do see that we're hitting very premium content alignment.
Something that's quite interesting to me is that toy popularity waxes and wanes over time. I mentioned that Power Rangers was like my thing growing up. I don't know how popular Power Rangers is with the younger generation relative to some of the other brands that you guys have. I mean, genuinely don't know. I'm not saying that it's unpopular. I just really have no idea.
We'll say it's not media supported right now,
Yes.
which is why I had used that term when you brought it up. So it's not something that we're actively, I would say producing tons of new items behind to media support. It's one of our brands that we have a term called the vault. So some of our brands go back into the vault. We wait until there's, either a culturally relevant time, whether it's an anniversary of the show or something's going to be coming up that we think is going to be a big moment for the brand. And then we might reintroduce it later. Like you certainly saw that around even Ghostbusters, where obviously a movie was coming out. We renew and have new toys coming out related to it. Same thing with My Little Pony. When the movie came out, My Little Pony resurged. But then it's not, I would say, one of our main media supported.
So yeah, how do you decide, I guess, when to bring it back in? Is it only to align with big cultural IP?
I would say cultural IP, or honestly, like retail. Like there's a larger, just in terms of what's being sold in, what's trending, all of that. But one thing I want to go back to that you did mention upon is something that Jen and I often talk about is just the life cycle of toys has shrunk considerably from when we were kids.
Right.
Just like the amount of time that kids nowadays play with toys is about half the time that they did when we were kids. So when you think about it, like, sadly, like an 8-year-old is probably like into skincare at Sephora and no longer playing with a Baby Alive doll. They're definitely like, it's part of their universe way sooner than it ever was in the past.
In part because they're seeing influencers on platforms. Yeah. Although there's not supposed to be any 8-year-olds on TikTok. I've been
just
told
exposed
that's not allowed.
Yeah. They have an older sister, right? Like it's all of those things.
And
like,
the content,
God forbid, they lied about their age to get out.
Or I would say too, I mean, to be honest with you, all of the content that's being produced on TikTok now is also being put on YouTube. YouTube Shorts obviously exploding. Tons of kids are really leaned into that placement. So
does that concern you guys from if people are necessarily spending more time with, I guess, a makeup brand than maybe a toy brand? Does that shrink the age limit in which people
sort of category?
I mean, things?
It's public information. Like the toy category as a whole is shrinking, right? It just, the life cycle of it is way truncated than it ever was. So like we have a shorter amount of time to speak to these children. And when we do, we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's impactful, that we are putting our media out there in a way that's sufficient. So we make sure we're breaking through. And then it's just, more opportunity as you think about retail media, how we're going to just convert those people. Because if you think about retail media as well, it's like people are reading reviews, like they're using these sites to shop more so than they ever did in the past. So it's just very interesting if you think about the consumption, the landscape, and specifically our category of what that means for kids.
In terms of sort of the future of this area, I've heard that lots of brands are looking at trying to influence large language models because more and more people are actually, to your point around finding reviews on websites, are searching things and Google search or ChatGPT or whatever, and trying to find out about different brands and what people think of them and specific toys. Is that something that you're concerned with from a performance side in terms of wanting to make sure that your brand shows up, or the various brands show up in a positive light?
Always. But I think that there's a lot of work that needs to happen around that and requires, at this point, still like a lot of adaptation and manpower that we're just scratching that surface.
Gotcha. But the effort is, it sounds like you've almost conceded the fact that the amount of time that a kid might be spending with toys is not going to get any bigger.
No.
So it's really focused on what can we do within the shorter and shorter amount of time.
At least from a media perspective, we can only control what we control. Of course, like product innovation, that's not something we oversee. But of course, like if there's some sort of toy that they create that, helps that life cycle.
Do you worry, do you try and move people up in terms of, okay, maybe you've played with some of our
Play-Doh,
kid
so
brands.
Then you're going to keep going.
So do you keep going up into different types of toys as people say, I don't know, Nerf, I suppose, is more older.
No, because that would take more of like a Hasbro umbrella wrapping, which we don't do. Like kids see these as individual brands. And so there's no reason that like Play-Doh would have equity on building you to moving into Transformers or Beyblade or...
Yeah, no one knows the difference. Like there's Hasbro, but no one knows that we own typically, right? I mean, you knew because you wrote them down, right? So,
well, I do my research.
Did your research?
Podcast.
Yes. Yeah. But typically, like the average parent doesn't know that we own Play-Doh, we own Nerf, we own Monopoly.
Yeah. So what Kristina was saying, my role especially within brand media, right? Because I need to make sure that kids are thinking positively and want this item. Like what is going to make them want it? And so I call it creative media planning, which is what we were kind of getting into with creators and just like the shift in the way people view things. It's honestly like content is in the eye of the beholder. Like what you think is scripted content, it could be creator content, it could be a Roblox integration in live music program within, Fortnite or like I said, Roblox. And so really we're thinking about like, again, how am I going to be the most impactful and what is the most engaging way and placements that people are leaned in? And how do I tie that into bringing this brand to life as that? Like, it's no longer just, Kristina always says this, make a beautiful, polished, video or linear asset that's just going to run. It's like, yes, that's important as a piece of it, but it's more so how we think about how we're creatively showing up in the media placement and using that media placement to bring the brand to life.
And that requires both creative and media to be really talking together.
It's like gone are the days of the one size fits all.
Right.
I can't. Like when people say that, I'm like, stop. We're not.
And this is where we also lean on the media vendor, quite frankly. Like they're the ones with the data of how kids are,
And you trust them to sort of be marketing.
We're very, involved in the approval process.
We still brief them in and hand them off our brand toolkit and guidelines. But we do trust that if, one of our main vendors is selling inventory within Roblox, and part of that includes in-gaming integrations, we trust that they know what are the most popular games within Roblox. And this is where it again comes to correctly matching the brand with the game. What we found is kids are actually really big hand raisers of saying like, this is how they learn. They actually use gaming or researching things on YouTube in order to learn. And so they're leaning in and saying like, if a brand is actually going to bring me some value, like, hey, I'm hand raising within this in-gaming environment, but you better bring something that's native to the gameplay. There's nothing worse than trying to shove yourself in there. I know we joked about the word authentic before we started recording, but that's where it's like, it needs to be native. And what a kid would expect, trying to come in and throw a brand and be like, collect these ponies. And it's a game that has nothing to do with, hunting and collecting and scavenging. Like it just doesn't work. But where does, again, like the brand and the product and what it can do work really well with something that's popular? And that's where we really lean on our media partners to say, like, how do we bring this to life in the most native experience?
Is most of your gaming investment going into Fortnite and Roblox, or are there other options?
Fortnite is also 13 plus, so not Fortnite. The majority of what we're targeting right now is kind of under 11. I would say though it's a combination of kind of those in-gaming Roblox, Minecraft, but also really important mobile gaming. Mobile gaming has just exploded in the last few years, and it's what started as really being like on our boy 8 to 11 plans. then quickly moved down to, boys and girls 5 to 8, because girls are gaming just as much as the boys. Particularly girls tend to mobile game more, whereas boys tend to, the older they get, they start moving to consoles. And then you again have the mobile games. And I jokingly said this in a legal meeting the other day when they were like, oh, you're doing mobile gaming on preschoolers. And I was like, yeah, because it's the gateway drug into gaming. And, got a lot of serious looks at that one, but
not surprised.
Yeah. But I truly believe it. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and the first thing she says to me when she comes home from school is, can I download a game? And now it's become so extreme. She has so many games that I have to say, which one are you deleting? So now she can only have 6, and she has to choose one to delete before. But I think that's also stemming from, right, us as parents. You go out to eat, you want 5 seconds to actually have a conversation. So you hand your phone over, you're like, here, just keep yourself busy. And so these kids can navigate smartphones. I think we saw a stat once, it was like 87% of kids 3 to 5 can navigate a smartphone but can't tie their shoe.
Wow. Well, that doesn't make me feel especially positive about maybe the way
they're natives, right? Like this is the first generation that has grown up and never known a time where you didn't have an Amazon and can buy.
It's even wilder if you think about it, because I think as adults we very much have adapted. Like we almost expect to see things that are tailored to us. This generation, they demand it. They require it. They don't want to see something that has nothing to do with them. So it's all the more reason why we have to be that much more focused on every single thing that we do.
It doesn't worry you at all that this is sort of the world that we have to operate with?
Of course it worries me, but I can't fix it.
I'm like, it actually presents a really fun opportunity. I think this is where the media side that I particularly love is just thinking again about like, what is the consumer insight? What is the consumer behavior? How can we take that and build it into a program that creates value? So I actually see it the other way.
I'm terrified as a parent. Don't get me wrong, just because like I just want everyone to slow down slightly, and then I work in this job that I'm like
well, you're in some ways you're responsible for creating the world in which you don't love or are uncomfortable with.
I mean, there are yes, but church and state.
Right. Well, it's really interesting. I mean, I was a gamer myself. I am. But I started on like a console when I was like 4 or 5. Yeah. And it is, you're probably right that it's different that's
what console?
PlayStation 2. See, I'm still quite young. But
okay, I was like, no Nintendo. Okay.
I mean, I had TurboGrafx 16. I don't even know.
I actually, I haven't heard of that. I'm so sorry.
I was like, I had Atari was my first system.
It's different. Yeah, but gaming has increased and become popular. And also the parents of young children were playing games like yourselves when they were young. So it's become more of a standard media consumption practice.
Yeah, and honestly, like a family event, like it's just as important as the parents. Like I sat in my 8-year-old son last year. We decided, he was like, hey, like we had given him the Switch and he had Bowser's Fury, and we sat and played it together and beat it together. And so it's almost like, we're not doing family night necessarily, watching movie together in the living room, but that's like the new norm of how to connect with your kid and have moments together. And it's, gaming being very prevalent, because to your point, we all grew up with systems and now it's having the opportunity to do it with our children.
Do you use YouTube or Twitch as a way to also speak to that audience? Or is it, I guess, because gamers can be quite difficult to reach with ads. It's no surprise to anyone in this room or anyone who's listening to this.
It depends on the product. So I would say, we've talked a lot about the toy and games side of the Hasbro business. Certainly within Hasbro larger umbrella, we have Wizards of the Coast, which includes Magic the Gathering, which is very different.
Big. I've not played it, but yeah.
Okay. I was like, my husband is a huge fan. He's been playing since the game was created. So if you would like to start, I'm sure he would be more than happy. He's always looking for more people to play.
Yeah.
And then we also have now a new video gaming vertical as well, with a AAA game that's going to be coming out soon. So we're certainly like within that realm. I would say like a Twitch is more relevant. It's an older audience. I think where you see kids is they don't have necessarily the attention span or the want to sit through a full live stream. They want the culled down version, edited with a lot of splashy graphics and voiceovers and music integrated into the clip that's being put on YouTube. And so YouTube is certainly a place. And, I say all the time too, and certainly as a gamer, you could probably relate to this, but my 8-year-old, I mean, he calls it his like system. So he sets up, he's got the Switch in his hand, he's got the TV on, he's watching someone, play a shrine, beat Zelda. He's got the tablet sometimes on another thing. And he's got his whole setup going on where he's actively watching people play to get tips and tricks while he's actively playing. And so what I say, like, this has really opened us, even in the last year, the opportunity to think about that surrounding experience for a kid and how do we make sure that we're kind of 360 surrounding, because they're creating this moment all of themselves.
But also cutting through, because you just named like 3 or 4 different media consumption items or platforms or whatever it is that he's using all at the same time. And we know you can't pay attention to more than one thing at a time.
And also, like, how much easier would it be if we only worked on one brand? So think about that, right? Like, because that's always comes back to the challenge for us is it's a portfolio company. So, the dollars are limited. We're doing our best to make sure that we're adequately funding each one. But it comes to a point where we're like, okay, like, what are going to be our big bets? Because we're not going to be able to do all of these things well, right? So that's...
How have priorities changed over time?
It changes year over year. It's really about what's at retail. It really is driven by, I would say, like, retail is the paramount in terms of...
You sort of work backwards to see what's selling well and then support...
What's being forecasted. If something has a huge forecast, we're obviously going to put dollars behind it. If something has a smaller one, then, it's not going to get as much support.
To what degree has the sort of macro uncertainty over the past quarter or two, basically since the Trump administration came in and started talking about tariffs, affected your potential media spend, if at all?
I mean, so far, it's just a lot of scenario planning. We're really, just like anything we do, we're just, we always have a back pocket plan of some kind. And that's very much, I feel very much for the people who are doing pricing. It's hard to watch, I feel, for them just because every day something changes. But we're just in the point now of putting together plans for second half. So it's kind of a, like, let's wait and see.
I would say, knock on wood, we have not seen any adjustments so far to the original plan. I think our global brand teams and the regional marketing and sales organization that's been doing a lot of this legwork has been incredibly thoughtful in how they're approaching it. And I think too, like Hasbro's overall stance, and we kind of paused and waited, which has been a benefit because obviously, as you kind of alluded to, it's been changing overnight, and now appears to be in a more stable place.
Well,
as of today,
I haven't checked
I was
Truth Social yet.
As of yesterday. Who knows what today will bring when the U.S. might be waking up now.
By the time this podcast goes out,
it will be null and void, and I will have sounded very silly. But we can't predict, and so we've been kind of holding the line on what we feel are our biggest bets that we're going to chase after, and where we're kind of holding the line and partnering really closely with the retailers to make sure that they're going to be in a good position. But so far, we've just, as Kristina said, been kind of scenario planning. Like, if this happened, how do we adjust plans? What do we want to keep flexible? What do we feel like is still going to
And that's exactly it, the word flexible. Like, that is basically the paramount of anything that we do. We've just really learned, specifically the kid industry and also adults, you have to be flexible. And if there's something that we really are going to commit to, then we'll let the larger internal teams know, like, this is firm. These are firm dollars. You're signing the line. We own it.
Right. What I don't want to take you through all the different scenario plannings, but if there is a massive price inflation issue, because in retail, I would imagine this could happen everywhere. Mm-hmm. Does that impact how you guys change your media planning strategy?
So I guess this is the counter of what I just said, the benefit of being a portfolio company, because if you think about it, we have a variety of brands within similar targets. So we could obviously switch media if that happens to work, or we can just cancel it and not support something if it's something that isn't nailed to a wall.
Right.
Yeah. And it absolutely will affect it, because if an item becomes almost to the point of being cost prohibitive for people to buy in the same economy where not only our product, but everything is becoming increasingly expensive. I think that's where I was kind of getting to where I said it, we kind of paused. So the teams were looking at all of these kind of things, like how much would it potentially add to the cost of a product? And do we feel like we should still move forward and keep producing this year, or potentially take that and hold it? Maybe it becomes first half's item, or next second year, we're going to choose to launch this item as well, in which case we would cancel media. So I would say we're a very small team. We're a very nimble team. We're very used to needing to, and this is the other reason we needed an agency who could also work really well with us. We move incredibly fast at an incredibly high volume of brands and media plans that we're putting together to support in multi-markets. And it might be that it's a US problem, but it's not an EMEA problem, for example. And so we're always kind of looking at that overall scenario, like, does the item go away in the US, but it remains in EMEA where we underfunded in EMEA? Is there an opportunity to shift dollars that would have been US media into EMEA to boost? And like, what does that look like for the forecast? And so partnering with the regional team and seeing if that's something that we can even do. So we're very used to planning things and changing them. Today, we're actually heading to our agency to see the first round of all of second half planning, which is predominantly focused within the Q4 timing. So certainly, if in another month things are still uncertain about where things are looking, we could still pivot at this point. It's really kind of what Kristina was saying in the nail to the wall, like the custom content creators, like those things we tend to have to kick off because they just take a bit of time to produce. We're looking typically at a 2 to 3 month window for any kind of, gaming ad, like gamified, if it's actually not just running, our video content within, if it's really partnering with a gamer to bring the product to life, or integrating in stream or whatever that might be. Like, those are just bigger programs that take more time. So those will be locked in. But a lot of the media that we're running, especially if you think about YouTube and how it's literally the top channel in every market, like every kid across the world is on YouTube. Like, that's not distinct media consumption in a single market. And so when you think about all of that spend, like it's very flexible up until 2 weeks out, of running.
But I mean, I think that goes back to my comment about like my genuine love for our legal team, because truthfully, like having really great terms that support us and our business, and just the uncertainty really is imperative to be successful.
And I'm sure that the U.S. government would love to hear businesses talking about moving media spend outside the U.S. in relation.
It's like we just got
interesting
flagged.
to hear.
We might not be able to go home.
Yeah.
Final questions. We talked a lot about how you guys are flexible and the uncertainty, obviously, of the current situation. But how are you looking to sort of stay ahead of the curve when it comes to media strategy? Obviously, you're talking to the youngest generations, or at least you're endeavoring to talk to a lot of the youngest generations. What's most important for you to nail over the next year or two in terms of just from a broad strategy perspective?
For me, I would say testing and learning. No matter what we're doing, we always have to make sure that we are investing in things that feel slightly uncomfortable, so we can see if there's anything that we can adapt in the US, externally. Incrementality is something that's really big for retail media right now. So really just trying to understand, if I put $1 in, where's the best place for me to put it to get the best return on ad spend out, which obviously varies tremendously because that's not something Jen would ever track. But I would say for me, it's those two.
On my end, I'd say it's first the creative media planning that I was saying, and really making sure we're nailing how we're showing up in the channels, knowing that, to your point, kids are so bombarded with things screaming for their attention. So how do we make sure that we're offering them something of value when we're showing up so that they remember it and they're engaging and leaning into it? Global media oversight is also incredibly important to us. And so what I really mean by that, we kind of hinted at this a bit in the beginning, but a lot of times we're running the same partners across markets because the partner is in and has scale within all of the markets. And particularly for even, EU3, which sometimes has a little bit lower of budgets or is historically more of a traditionally led market where we're still buying way more TV. The US, we're down to almost nothing anymore across brands, but certainly within France and Germany, we're spending a lot more within linear in those markets because it's still where kids are. So we tend to have smaller digital budgets. And so how do we think about, if we're running with the same partner across markets, how do we get added value of something the US would have already paid for, already produced as a media ad unit, and give added value into these other markets? And so that's certainly one of my biggest focuses for H2, and thinking about like, how can we make sure that the media mix is evolving over time in some of these more traditional markets, knowing that's where consumption is going to end up, where the US is. It's just going to take a little bit more time. But we certainly don't want to lose out on opportunities to do things where we know kids are still in gaming, still massively on YouTube. So we want to kind of unlock those opportunities across multi-markets.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. The rest of the world does not necessarily look like the US in terms of media consumption.
It does not.
And it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yes.
Jen, Kristina, thanks so much for joining me. This has been a really interesting conversation.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Media Leader Podcast. Our executive producer is me, Jack Benjamin. Special thanks to our production partner, Trisonic. You can find all our episodes on the podcast platform of your choice or on our website at uk.themedialeader.com. But do please remember to subscribe to be notified of our next episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at The Media Leader to receive daily coverage of all the biggest news stories in media and advertising. From all of us at The Media Leader, I'm Jack Benjamin. See you next time.